we know that worldwide school closures due to the pandemic have affected more than 60 million of children and teenagers. So many of the research has focused on academic performance, and they have shown that they usually experience a decrease in motivation due to the less frequent content among classmates, teachers, and peers. But I want to focus my attention on the perception of the importance of education. If OCHA has like a pyramid, the Maslow pyramid of the importance of survival, security, your leisure, your home, everything. So I'm going to focus in how home environments, the characteristics of households have affected your personal perception of the importance of education. And at the same time, how is your perception about the performance of public policies, education public policies in your countries? So for this purpose, I'm going to use two Eurobarometers, which are European surveys for the UA 28 or now 27 plus United Kingdom. One performed in 2019 and the other performed in 2020. So each sample consists of more than 30,000 observations. We have the same dependent variables in both surveys. First, a dummy variable that takes the value 1 if the respondent believes that the education system is one of the country's most important concerns. So from the perspective of policymakers, are they devoting the necessary attention to the public education system? And the second dependent variable is personal that takes the value 1 if respondent mentions that education system is one of his or her most important personal concerns. So in this map, I saw the heterogeneity across European countries. So the red areas denote the average notification COVID cases per 100,000 inhabitants. So higher intensity in Sweden, in France, in Spain. The purple bricks denote the number of days of school and universities closure. And the diameter of the green circles denote the concern about education in the country from the point of view of policymakers. So it's larger in Spain and in Greece, but smaller in France, for example. In this other map, I saw the relationship between mortality and your perception about education. So the gray areas denote the percentage of people in each NUTS, which is the denomination of European regions, who state that one of their personal concerns is education. So higher intensity, higher gray intensity in Nordic countries, Baltic countries, and in Scotland. And the orange circles, almost red in some regions, the excess mortality in 2020. So to have a measure of the mortality, we have compared 2020 and 2019 with a previous period, which is the average between 2015 and 2018. So this is the model that we estimate. We have our dependent variable, the importance of education, the relative mortality with respect to the average 2015-2018, the dummy for the year 2020, and the interaction between relative mortality and year 2020, the number of days of schools or university closure, the average notification COVID cases, vector X, which includes sociodemographic characteristics, age, gender, nationality, marital status, relation with economic activity, and importantly, difficulties in paying bills, self-reported level in society and municipality of residence. We also include regional fixed effects and country fixed effects. So I divide the table of results, the left part for the perception of education from the point of view of policymakers, the right part your personal perception. And I have obtained the results for the whole sample and also dividing the sample if the household has children or has no children. So the first result, my results are the most important ones, number 1, 2, and 3. The first one is that the notification rate increases your perception that education is important. However, although the coefficient is significant and positive, if we compare it with the magnitude of relative mortality interacted with year 2020, which is result number 3, we appreciate that the magnitude in this last case is higher. So the impact of mortality has increased the concern about education, mainly in households with children. The number of days of school closure, which is result number 2, is significant from the point of view of policymaker and your personal point of view. However, the magnitude of the coefficient is quite small. Now I have repeated the analysis by dividing the sample in certain groups. According to self-reported social class, so individuals say, I consider myself to be middle class, working class, higher class, we appreciate a huge difference. Between working class, we have a negative coefficient for the interaction of relative mortality and year 2020, minus 0.0297. However, this coefficient turns positive for middle class and positive and quite larger for higher class, plus 0.0776. So the concern about education has increased more in higher class, which we identify with more affluent households as compared to working class households. And also, from the point of view of working class households, we appreciate that they consider that the answer of policymakers has not been satisfactory. The coefficient highlighted in green is negative and significant. Also, I divide the population according to difficulties making ends meet. And again, we observe a difference between those households which have always or almost always difficulties. The coefficient is negative. So I'm not saying that they are not concerned about the education of their children, but in these specific circumstances of a health emergency, other priorities are more important. Perhaps obtaining the necessary supplies. You know that many businesses were closed, so people that depend the amount of the earnings of the household depend of your business. They were very difficult circumstances. For people who work, for example, at university, you know that you are going to continue receiving your wage every month. So it's completely different situation. So also for difficulties making ends meet never or almost never, we appreciate that they are quite satisfied with the perception of policymaker performance, and also they devote more attention to the personal circumstances regarding education of their children. Now, as before, a huge gap between foreign and national. Foreign individuals, and also I include unemployed individuals, as before, I'm not saying that they're not concerned about education, but other priorities have become more important. So in this case, they are less concerned about the role of education in their household. And for individuals who are still studying, I'm quite concerned about this result. First, because they are more concerned about their personal situation. The coefficient for edupersonal is positive and significant. So taking into account that they are surveyed when they are age 18 or older, these students are in university, doing a master, a PhD, though they were really concerned about the impact of the first wave or the performance, but they are unsatisfied with the performance of policymakers. Now in these pictures, I'm going to relate the number of schools, the number of days of school closure with average notification rate. So the profile is quite low for households who do not have children living with them. The profile is higher for households with children, which is graph 3 and 4. However, we appreciate in number 3 that the concern about education increases for higher notification rates. And the opposite happens with graph 4. The profile decreases for higher notification rates, which correspond to the situation where schools were still closed by the 31st of July. So they consider that at least they are not concerned about education, but the risk of contagion, given that schools were still closed, is minimized. And in this sense, it's one concern less. And in this other graph, I relate the same, but instead of notification with mortality rate. As before, the profile is lower for households with their children, and the profile is completely different in households with children. And we appreciate that, considering that education is one of my important concerns, it peaks at mortality over mortality of 20% as compared to previous mortality rate, and then decreases. So in this extreme emergency situation, even your concern about education decreases. And regarding the concern from the point of view of policymaker, the profile is lower as compared to your personal profile, and even decreases more in situation of overmortality of 25% or 30% as compared to previous mortality. So my perception is that at least the first wave of the COVID pandemic has provoked a gap in the society. On one hand, immigrant, working class individuals, unemployed. On the other hand, parents with better economic status who are more concerned about the education of the children. And on the third group, students who are at university or a master and are concerned about how to finish their PhD or the master and insert in the labor market. So, and all of them are not very satisfied with the performance of the policymakers. So for the future, I would like to continue analyzing what will be the long-term effects of these profiles, if this has changed, taking into account posterior wave of the Eurobarometer, which also incorporate the perception about education, and will these shifting priorities will affect children's educational outcomes. So these are my future lines of research. Thank you for your attention, and that's all. Thank you very much.